Hi, you might have heard about plagiarism before and why we need to avoid it in academic writing and in any other type of writing. It's a very serious thing that we'd like to discuss in this video. So we get into it. What is plagiarism, actually? Well, let's get to the etymology of it. Plagiarism comes from the Latin word plagiarius, which means kidnapping. And right from that start, you could see that is a very serious thing. Kidnapping is a crime, isn't it? And so it must be a very serious thing to fall victim to plagiarism when it comes to academic writing or any other type of writing, and why we need to avoid it so that our writing could be looked upon with credibility and holding water. The core principles are that using others' work without proper acknowledgement, and also being fair enough to say that what I have put on paper is not mine alone, but belongs to other people too. I have borrowed ideas from other sources. It is just very impossible for any human to conceive an idea that is entirely new. Everything we think about now, someone might have thought about it and even written about it. That being the case, it means that when we write, we want to acknowledge sources. That is why it is good to be educated about the dangers of plagiarism and what we should do to avoid it. Either we know about it or we do not know about it. So let's move on. Now, in the university context, we have stringent citation rules in academia, without a doubt, because the consequences of not going by these stringent rules are that you will become guilty of plagiarism and your work could be taken for what it is not, and you could have a bad reputation as a scholar. So, as a student, you can have bad grades, you can be suspended, you can be removed from school completely, and you can face legal consequences. And that is why the definition by the Council of Writing Program Administrators says using others' language or ideas without acknowledgement. Now, take note of it. It's not just copying, it says using others' language. That is quoting people's words verbatim or ideas. So you can take somebody's ideas and rephrase the whole structure, but it is still not yours, it belongs to the person. So you have to acknowledge that person. And plagiarism includes direct copying, poor paraphrasing, and sometimes, interestingly, self-plagiarism. So if I write an article, for example, and it is published in one journal, and I'm writing a different article, and I'm borrowing ideas from the first article, I still need to acknowledge myself as though I was someone else. Without doing that, I could be a victim of self-plagiarism. We could think that, oh, it is my own idea. Without a doubt, that is true. But you are doing or writing a different article, borrowing an already existing idea from yourself. So you still have to acknowledge yourself, of course, by name and year and page numbers of your article. Now, it is also possible that plagiarism can be unintentional. It can be intentional. You know what you're doing, that you are stealing someone's idea, someone's thoughts, someone's words, and calling them your own. That is stealing, plagiarism. But it could also be unintentional. So you pick something, you don't know the source, and you put it out there. It is not your intention to steal those words or ideas. But the interesting thing is that most institutions judge based on outcome, not intent. It's just like tackling a footballer tackling another footballer and breaks his opponent's bones, he may not really mean to break his bones, but actually going for the ball. Well, the referee could miscalculate that the intent was to break the person's bones, and then the referee flashes a red card. Well, that's it. So whether you mean it or not, the outcome would justify that you are a victim of plagiarism. So it means that we have to be very careful when we write, when we cite ideas that are not our own. So even a clumsy citation could not be looked upon as innocence. You may not really intend to do that. And sometimes it happens to many scholars. You write and there is a quotation that you misquote or a citation that is wrongly done. Even that, you can be a victim. You may be innocent, but that is still plagiarism, which means that when we write, we have to be extremely careful to acknowledge every single idea, thought, word that we borrow or we take from a different source other than what is ours. And in fact, even if it is our own idea from a different journal, from a different article that we've written, published, we still have to acknowledge ourselves, of course, by name. Now, the consequences of plagiarism. What it does is that it takes away from students' personal and intellectual growth. When you steal someone's work, it never builds you up and makes you an intellectual. You are only photocopying, as it were, someone's idea. So it affects students' growth in developing into a good intellectual. You rob yourself of that goal. So it's good we avoid plagiarism. And of course, it shows a great disrespect to creators and the educational system. How would you feel if you see somebody quoting your words in an article without acknowledging the source? You will feel bad. It's the same thing. When we steal people's works, it's a form of disrespect. And then, of course, it means that we do not respect the educational system. We do not respect scholarship. We are being selfish. So plagiarism is a very, very, very serious thing that we need to be careful not to fall victim to. It also undermines social progress and scholarly integrity. Yeah, that's why we need to be careful. You may be a scholar or trying to be a scholar, working hard along the way, and one or two works that you cite without acknowledging the source could put your name into disrepute. So we want to keep integrity by doing the best we can, and we should, by acknowledging the sources that we refer to in what we write. Now, when do we document sources? First, when we quote word for word, when we quote verbatim, we need to document the sources. When we paraphrase, which means we expand the ideas, that could be someone's idea, but we expand the wording, paraphrasing, we still have to acknowledge the source. Or we summarize, we condense the ideas into fewer words. It means we still have to acknowledge the source. We also, when we refer to others' ideas or data, even data, somebody collects data and then you use that data for your research. Yes, the hard work has been done by someone. Why do you want to take that hard work without acknowledging the person? So, when we use someone's data, we show respect by acknowledging the source of the data. When we use media or visual elements that are not ours, suppose you're analyzing some pictures of, let's say, medicine package. Now, when you take those pictures, if it is from Kina Pharma, you have to acknowledge Kina Pharma. If it is from HP, you have to acknowledge HP. Whatever the case is, you have to acknowledge that. So it's very important we acknowledge sources. And of course, you may not need to cite your own ideas. That's your own idea that has been generated anew. You do not need to cite it. Common knowledge. Of course, you wouldn't want to go looking for somebody to cite for that. The sun rises from the east and sets at the west. You don't need anybody to quote that Africa is a continent. You don't know anybody to cite that the earth is a planet. These are common knowledge that you don't need anybody to cite. And well-known quotes. Two heads are better than one. A bird in hand is better than two in the bush. All these well-known quotes don't no more belong to anybody, so you don't need to quote them or to look for a source. Belongs to everybody now. So yeah, you don't need to cite those sources. And you need to understand common knowledge, definition that is widely accepted, undisputed facts. You don't need to cite common knowledge. For example, DNA structure is common knowledge. Historical dates like Ghana gaining independence in 1957, you don't need to quote anybody or to cite anybody. That's common knowledge. The moon reflects light from the sun. That's now common knowledge. Now, when you are unsure, cite. That takes care of everything. When you are unsure that this is common knowledge, just cite. And the importance of audience and field knowledge. You want to see to whom is my writing going. If it is just common knowledge, not anything for academic purposes, you may not need to cite. But if you are in doubt, cite. Now, when you are integrating sources, there are some methods to follow. When it comes to quotations, preserve style and emphasis. When it comes to quotation, preserve style and emphasis. So even if you quote a source and the source is written in pidgin English, do not correct them into standard English. When you quote, you just lift. It's like cut and paste. Nothing is changed. You preserve the style and the emphasis. You don't add a thing to it, and you still have to acknowledge. When you paraphrase, it means you reword with similar detail. The details are there, but you're just doing a rewording, expanding to give more explanation to the point. You still have to cite anyway. Of course, you summarize, you condense ideas. You still have to cite. And when you use charts, graphs, images with attribution, you have to cite the sources. Now, examples of good and poor paraphrasing as a source. So show original text alongside. When it is poor paraphrasing, then it's too close. It's too close to the original. But if it is not the same word, you change the vocabulary, you use your own words, that's a good paraphrasing, but the idea still remain the same. And you have a strategic integration of sources. And it means that when you want to do that, it has to be purpose-driven source. So what do you have to use? You use summarizing prior research. You summarize prior research. You provide cases. You present evidence. You expand ideas. You critique claims. Okay. So when you are integrating ideas that you want to acknowledge, there are many ways to handle them. It is not to be handled in just one way, just quoting. You do many things to it, and you know the particular item you are taking from someone's work. So you summarize sometimes, but you still acknowledge. And you provide examples in the source. You present evidence to back your ideas. Maybe you have a point, but there is an evidence elsewhere. You can use that evidence to back your ideas. And of course, and you expand ideas from sources and add them to yours to build up what you're writing. And of course, you can criticize, point out the good sides, the not so good side, and how that enhances your work. Critiquing is also one of the ways of integrating sources in your writing. And of course, at the end of the day, all of these sources must be acknowledged to avoid plagiarism. Now, let's have our final thoughts. What ethical writing is about is that intellectual honesty. You want to tell the truth, that this idea is not mine. I am honest enough to say so. It pushes academic credibility because academic work is where we're supposed to trust. The findings of academic work affect our life. And if there are lies in it, then we have a problem. We'll have a huge problem. So academic credibility is important as one of the ethics of academic writing. And you respect other people's work. You encourage dialogue. And of course, not deceit. Yes, we have come to see what plagiarism is. From the Latin source, we know it means kidnapping, which is a crime. And we have come to see that it's a serious thing. And we just have to be honest that we do not know it all, that ideas that we have from other sources do not belong to us, and that we want to say that we want to be honest writers and avoid plagiarism. Thank you very much for watching.